Victory is safe and secure. A perfect place to raise the family you've always wanted.
I was really intrigued by the idea behind Don't Worry, Darling when I thought about the idea of someone who lives in a society that is designed entirely for their comfort, being the one to discover that that society is corrupt. That's something that is so worth creating content about.
Here you can live the life.
That's definitely been an interesting thing, attacking the character. When is she not enjoying things anymore? When is she not enjoying her life there? And how much of performance does she have to make to other people to make sure that it still looks like she's playing the part?
You can watch it as a movie that's about this simulation thing, and I think the other side of it is the idea of somebody having like a breakdown.
Just a fantastic thriller. It's a throwback to great films from the 70s and the 60s. There's a lot of themes that are relevant for now. What are we doing?
Changing the world.
I love psychological thrillers, and I was so excited about one that featured a female heroine who was so brilliant and nuanced and complex, and I thought this is a story that will allow for an actress to really flex with a really rich story. And it was an original idea, and I think nowadays discovering an original idea and being able to invest your time as a filmmaker in something original is just really exciting.
Everyone is acting like I'm crazy, and I'm not crazy.
Shane and Carrie Van Dyke came up with this brilliant idea, and it was this really wonderful allegory for feminism, and it was about friendship and about romance and about the smaller and less obvious ways that we battle with this kind of misogyny every day.
Katie Silberman and I dove in together, and we started by just kind of stripping away the world down to the very core questions that we found the most compelling.
We did a lot of research and talked a lot about our own grandmothers and the women in our families and what it was like for them to grow up in a certain time period. We also did a lot of research into things like the Manhattan Project. We had so much fun digging into societies almost built around something secretive where everyone was dedicated to the cause in such a way that they really became their own ecosystems. And then we spoke with doctors at MIT about simulation theory.
One scientist from MIT read the script, and I was prepared for her to say, like, what is this? This is Hollywood nonsense. And she's like, oh yeah, this could all happen.
Welcome to the Victory Project.
Every one of these conversations brought it back to human responsibility.
Allow your consciousness to sink into this world, into this truth.
It's about control, manipulation, oppression, relationships. It's about how do you keep your life perfect? And when it's not, what are you going to do about it?
This film says so much about mental health and obviously the patriarchy. It's going right at it.
You want to see the boy dance?
You were so unhappy. You hated your life.
It was my life. You don't get to take that from me.
I gave this to you.
This is something that we deal with as humans, and people are pushing back against a structure that has been established and maintained for thousands of years. But in order to really get through to people, finding creative ways through entertainment to ask questions that can actually compel people to question their own decisions, that's the trick.
Attention, Victory residents. We are under a shelter in place. Stay inside and await further instructions.
I love casting. Because casting is writing. You learn so much about the story. I used to work for a casting director when I was in my early 20s, and she would teach us about how the puzzle was such an integral part of the process. It's not just about great actor, great actor. It's about finding actors who could bring that humanity to life and bring different kind of flavors of personality.
This group of people is the easiest group of actors to write for in the world, not only because they originate so many brilliant ideas themselves, but they're all so talented. You just want to keep writing more and more pages for them.
Alice, how many babies should Violet have?
Oh, at least 7.
I knew that the Alice that Florence would create was different than what we had on the page.
Everything about her is more relaxed, the way that she moves, the way that she dances through her day, trying to enjoy as much of what she has in front of her.
Christ, where have you been?
Once I spoke to Florence as Alice, I was like, oh, of course, this is what it is. There's something about Florence that's so organic and human that I wanted to just really invest in that. The casting of Jack was really tricky. We wanted a kind of worthy scene partner to Florence. We wanted their relationship to seem singular. And that even within the community of Victory, Jack and Alice were different.
It's gonna break. Yeah.
I had asked if Harry Styles was available. I had seen things here and there that seemed like evidence of, oh, this is someone who has tremendous presence and intelligence and honestly fearlessness.
When you're putting a cast together, obviously you want people who are going to be best for the role, and then sometimes I think when people get on really well, it's kind of, there's like a chemistry that you can't really fake.
It's very rare that you do instantly have that fun connection with someone.
Harry and Flo worked together to create this incredibly authentic and warm and nuanced and human relationship, and then it became about who to surround them with.
Is this a camera? Sorry, I just...
Oh, are we doing BTS right now?
Is that?
Oh.
To be cast to play the husband of the woman directing the film was very flattering because she could choose to be partnered with anyone.
Everyone is so talented and, you know, perfectly cast.
Truly, and this is what everyone always says, like, everyone's amazing, but truly everyone is so amazing and warm and fun.
We're the Johnsons.
I mean, we talked a bit before we started filming. Yeah, Olivia kind of gave us both free rein on, you know, just play around with your backstory, and we both went dark and creepy. He may have kidnapped me, and it may have been brutal.
Definitely kidnapped you.
For me, coming from a theater background, I am so used to rehearsal and playing around and trying it a bunch of different ways. It's nice to be working with someone who encourages that type of discovery.
The character of Frank was such a delicious character to write. He had to be someone that you just couldn't help but listen to. And when I think of actors with great voices, one of the first people I think of is Chris Pine.
Dean, what is the enemy of progress?
Chaos.
Yeah.
What was difficult and interesting is to find a way into a character whom you obviously despise in many ways for what he's doing, but you have to make sense of him in a way that at least makes sense enough to you as the actor, so when you portray him, you're not judging him the whole time.
We are not going backwards. We're pushing forwards, yeah?
I think Chris is such a brilliant actor.
We move!
Chris himself is so intelligent that I knew he would understand exactly what made Frank tick.
I don't know what he was like, if he was cult world or if he was more of a philosopher thinker, or maybe he's just an entrepreneur, but clearly he has a brand that he's trying to sell.
Whose world is this?
I had the chance to meet so many great actors for this movie, and I wanted it to be a world that the audience enjoyed being in, to the point where you'd be really conflicted when Alice was trying to take it all down. You'd feel like, I know this is the right thing, but I love these people.
Welcome home.
World creation is the best part about being a director. It's the greatest. It's when you pull in your team of your production designer, your DP, your costume designer, and finally your actors, and you create this environment. I really based Victory on the Rat Pack of the 1950s, a life of excess and debauchery without consequence. So it was interesting to think, how could we create a world that is so delicious in that time, but that we know in the back of our minds is problematic?
Architecturally, the space of Victory is designed to feel like a utopia. So where we are, Canyon View Estates, was designed in the 60s by an architect named William Kreisel, who decided that he wanted to build these homes that were simple, gorgeous, surrounding green grass. It was like everything that you could have all in one. One of the things that really caught me with the film is what we could actually expect to see in a simulated environment. One thing that happens in video games is when they achieve the technology to create, like, let's say, reflections on water, you see tons of it, like, the following year. So Canyon View Estates is a really simple architectural development, but it is covered in really specific breeze block and shadow block. And because the community was developed over the course of years, the shadow block and the breeze block changes from block to block, even though it is this cookie cutter community. I believe that if we did have a simulation, the creators would really kind of push the level of detail in the spaces and create like a real authentic universe.
Ready and action.
When we were location scouting and I drove to the site of Slim Aaron's famous photograph, Poolside Gossip, with Katie, and I was like, man, I mean, imagine if we could find something like that. And she's like, why don't we try to film there. And I was like, no, it's impossible.
We wanted the real world version of Frank to really care about architecture, and that when creating his simulated world, he would utilize them. So we thought, like, okay, that's like his dream place to live, and that's why it exists there.
All right, umbrellas. Let's get people in shade, please. Right away.
The costumes are as much a part of the design of this world as the production design. And Ariane Phillips, our costume designer, is one of the greatest costume designers in film history.
Costumes help give visual clues that help define character and identity. It was exciting because all these characters, from Violet to Alice to Peg, they are constructed by the men who've put them in Victory. So they are really created through the male gaze. The Alice that Jack creates in Victory is this idealized sexuality. You know, her clothes are tight, she's wearing heels all the time. Really kind of Jack's fantasy.
Victory is perfection. When you imagine the best possible life for yourself, how do you imagine it? You imagine it by palm trees, you imagine it by the pool, you imagine it with a cocktail in your hand, and you imagine looking amazing all the time. Everything is heightened and everything is perfect, and it's this ideal reality in 1950s.
Victory is a happy place. Everything is beautiful and perfect. And, you know, working with Maddie Labatique, the cinematographer's lighting, really affects how the costumes and how the emotion comes across.
All employees in transit to Victory headquarters.
We're gonna send her in at the same time and embrace this wider shot.
One of the reasons I really wanted to work with Maddie Labatique is because he understands visual language so well, and just the way that the camera moves having so much to do with tone created through cinematography.
One of the things I love about creating the language of a movie is the lens choice. In the desert, I used a Sigma Classics. Sigma makes these lenses where they basically took the entire coating off the front. And what that means is there's nothing to make the image have contrast. And they flare insanely. So in the effort to express the sort of desolate heat of the desert when both Kiki walks through it and when Alice goes through it, I used this set of lenses sort of signify you're out of shiny and you're into the desert.
You imagine that her POV is from that position, right?
How I light a scene. I try to keep it in a place that feels more photojournalistic. The sun's hitting the windows a certain way, but it's not perfect. I try to light the space and let these people exist in those spaces and keep the camera free for the director to be able to improvise.
The creative team around me was incredible. Everything having to do with creating the world of the movie actually lent itself to the themes of the movie, because an artificial world was actually what the whole movie was about. So even when we would wonder, like, will the audience notice that this palm tree isn't moving in the wind? Will it subconsciously create a question of what is real, and is this seeming odd because it's a movie, or is this seeming odd because there's something else that's wrong with this world? And we had so much fun kind of playing with all these questions.
Attention, Victory residents. Security level is red.
There's a scene in the dinner party, which is my favorite scene in the film.
She's good? Yes, she's not.
This is light. So about that backhand, though.
It is great. That's the windows I was talking about.
Alice is kind of unraveling because she's made this choice, provoked by Frank, to challenge him. She's made the choice to challenge him publicly, which is so dangerous.
My decorator and I have been like always obsessed with the fanciful nature of like 50s and 60s dinner parties. So when Olivia wrote one in, we're like, oh, we get to go all out with it. And the fish is alluding to the Last Supper. This is the moment where like Alice is facing down with Frank, and we wanted it to feel biblical and theatrical and kind of over the top. So we thought, like, what better than a giant fish on the dining table?
We were really excited about the idea that Frank is someone who is so arrogant and so high on himself that he has gotten a little bored. That kind of confidence is so disarming and made it such an interesting battle between the two of them.
As she's unraveling, he very, very delicately just provokes her to go further, but in that maddening way of doing so with such a kind of soft, soft voice.
No. Jack, it's okay. I'm curious to hear where she's going with this.
Frank is doing something to us.
The more calm he is, the more upset she's getting, and it's just brilliantly played.
This is my second time working with Chris, and to come back together again and play enemies was so exciting. He's an actor that I feel so safe with. No matter what I do, no matter what move I make, he'll always bat it right back to me.
Florence, I think she's one of the most dynamic and interesting actresses working today, and to be that young and that self-assured and that just fucking good blows me away every time I get a chance to work with her.
There's so much going on between each of the couples and between everyone, and the power kind of shifts around between everyone.
Frank, honey, I'll be in the car.
Olivia was not in that scene. She was able to direct it traditionally without being in the scene. And I think everybody at the table appreciates she was in the scene because the director was watching them all. It was a pretty simple scene to shoot, but so much hinged on it, you know. It's all performance. It's all performance.
I was expecting so much more from you. Good luck, Alice.
When we're actually trying to break through to people and get them to question really difficult things, sometimes using entertainment as a way to really break through the kind of fabric of society in a sharper, more effective way.
Hey, I loved that.
Good. It's a lot to ask people to step back and question the choices they've made or a system they're a part of. So why not use creative filmmaking to allow people to come to these questions in an organic way?
Action, flow, and go.